Welcome to another episode of Comedy Wham Presents with me, your host, Valerie, and sometime co-host, Miss Purrington. Oh, wait, no, not today. We are on location and we're joined by another cat. ComedyWham.com is your place to go for features about all Austin comedy. We bring you articles and podcasts featuring the best in Austin comedy in all its shapes and formats. The podcast project began in early 2016. We love interviewing funny people and sharing their stories. I like to delve into a comic's background and motivations, and will sometimes take a detour along the way. Consider the interview a way for you to get to know the folks that make the Austin comedy scene one of the best in the country. And now, Comedy Wham Presents our guest, Bryan Gutmann.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me.
So happy to get you, because I hear parenting has been a new role for you for a while. And haven't seen you out on the scene as much.
I know. Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah.
Because I want to be there. Just trying to juggle all that stuff. Yeah.
Well, I like to start these off by asking a one-word answer for the question, your past. Give us one word to describe your past.
Oh, man. What would that one word be? For my whole past, it would be... they're all just so generic. Everyone's same. It's the same as everybody's. Everyone's is the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my word's same.
Same.
Yeah. It's...
What a rebel.
It's good because you don't have a job. You don't have to do... Well, this is growing up, kid past.
Yeah.
I didn't know how far back you wanted me to wind the clock.
That's the beauty of the question, is you get to define the parameters.
I definitely jumped
answer.
straight into childhood past, like those years.
Yeah.
Because, grown up stuff, that's when it gets
Yeah.
boring and worse.
Right.
Yeah. It's a weird combination of you technically have more freedom, but you absolutely don't either. It's a weird thing. Yeah. Unless you're actually, I don't know, you pull off this comedy thing or something like that.
Yeah, like some of those super young comics.
Yeah.
Like, a Saffron.
Yeah, or like I think like a guy like Aziz Ansari was sort of known for moving up real fast or whatever, or maybe like it's always like grass is greener kind of thing, but I think relatively like that was an idea. Yeah.
Bryan, where did you grow up?
I grew up in this little town outside of Poughkeepsie, New York, called Pleasant Valley.
Okay.
Super tiny town.
How tiny was it?
This came up. I was at the Valve, and somehow Carrie Lendo and I started talking about that town. I think we're both originally East Coast people, and so I think it was just some conversation. And so I Googled it, Pleasant Valley population or something. It's like as of a year ago or something, as of recently, the population was still under 10,000 people.
Whoa.
It's a really small town. It's like, and it's still that way of we got a McDonald's or whatever.
That was
like
a
one of
big
those,
exciting thing. Stoplight was a big momentous occasion.
Always had stoplights, not to brag. But, tiny town. And now it's funny because Poughkeepsie, which is maybe like a little more like someone's heard of it at least, they have a comedy club now.
Ooh.
Yeah, and so now it's this weird thing of, still having family back there. It's like, if I go visit, like, do I email this club first and just be like, I used to live here, I do comedy, I've guaranteed, like, people that I can pull in and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's weird because I can't even, they have some name that doesn't really like stick in your brain, doesn't have some weird, some of them are like Go Bananas or whatever, but like, which is actually a great club. Yeah, I forget the name of it, but it's funny because it's New York and it's Poughkeepsie, and so the easiest thing in the world is hopping on a train to and from there to New York. And so the first time I heard of it, it's like, I didn't know they had a club. And I pulled up the website. It's like, there's, like, looking at the calendar, like Todd Barry and like all these New York comics. Because for them, it's
super easy.
Yeah, you can do a whole bunch of sets and then in the city. And then if you get this thing, it's just like a 90-minute train ride, something like that. So it's so weird to think of this tiny little town where not a whole lot seems to be going on. And then you they get the
Drawing
kind of the
nice
privilege
names.
of like all these great New York comics just shoot up there.
I
And
did some good market research to do
yeah,
that, to pull that off.
I know. Yeah, I'm curious because Poughkeepsie isn't always known for being like the best town, like safest and all that stuff. But
We're gonna
but
get
those are
sued.
always the cities. Like look at even when they're not dangerous, even when they're just like a thing you drive past and don't even notice.
Mm-hmm.
Those are always the places that someone sees that potential. Like like look at Mueller in Austin.
Yeah,
Like the whole,
that's right.
I have a buddy who him and his wife moved there years ago when it was like, oh man, this I don't know, dude. Like
sketchy,
and like their house was a super fixer upper, and now it's great house,
Mm-hmm.
and they just happened to
And they bought
they-
early, so they
they bought early, and now there's just this. It's like the place to be just sort of grew around them.
They just got a draft house.
yeah.
Which is like,
I
I mean,
know.
you've made it if you can get an Alamo draft house.
Alamo Draft House is a weird thing of when they when they became like a national chain.
Yeah.
My initial thing was like, that's a shame, Like you always want like it's like that band you don't want other people to know about. It feels like your thing.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's one of the things that made Austin so cool. And then I thought about how many people are moving to Austin and how congested it is. And I was like, maybe the key is whatever you like about
Export.
us, just wait where you are. We'll just send it to you.
Yes.
Don't move here.
Yes.
Like traffic is horrible.
Yeah.
Austin doesn't know how to solve that problem. Just stay where you are and we'll send all the draft houses and Torchies
Right.
tacos to you.
You read my mind.
Yeah. Like if you want those two things, we'll just wait. It'll all get to you. Just stay where you are.
Tito's is already being exported.
Tito's is everywhere. And
so,
that's
yeah.
another one where it's like, it's so dumb when like you watch a movie like, oh man, did you see that Tito's bottle at the bar? That was so cool. Like,
It's everywhere.
yeah, that's like being excited about seeing a McDonald's logo or something. It's just like, yeah, it's stupid. It's everywhere. It's booze. People are. That tends to catch on.
Yeah. Well, Brian, I hate to say this, but enough about you now.
Oh,
so,
good.
No,
No, that would be a relief.
I know.
I
it's
panicked
kind of
about that
funny.
one word thing.
Oh,
I don't want to go.
no, don't worry about it. Do not stress out. We got
Okay.
a lot of minutes left to burn here
Good.
for you to get uncomfortable.
It'll happen.
So, growing up, were you watching or listening to comedy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually.
What were some of your things?
Yeah, it was definitely a thing I kind of latched onto. And I mean, it's not like I owned a bunch of like records or something, and I didn't have that old like. I feel like there's so many comics who have that story of like the older brother that like like wave you into his room, like listen to this Carlin thing or whatever. I didn't have that, but there was stuff like there was this old show on VH1 called VH1 Stand Up Spotlight, and it was, and I had like a weird, I always wondered, is my vague memory of this the way that show really was? Because in my memory it was like really not dark as in like tonally, but actually like an actual like kind of showcase show, like that era's premium blend or whatever.
Okay.
But in my mind, I was like, I never remembered it being so real bright and flashy. And I found like one weird clip of it online, and it was exactly how I remembered it, where they literally just, it was like going to Cap City, but just putting that on TV, where it was, and obviously like not like a full someone doing like 45 minutes or whatever, but like, a bunch of comics doing like 5 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
But in the sense of lights down, spotlight on the stage, you're not like the audience isn't lit and all that stuff. It was just like a straight up like how you would do a show, and then they just kind of filmed that. I think Rosie O'Donnell was the host.
Wow.
So I have like pretty good memories of watching that growing up. I forget I don't know how old I was when that show was on. And then my family always had like Jeff Foxworthy tapes and stuff like that, and my family liked comedies, and it was weird, even being little kids. I remember watching movies where it's like, I don't know if this isn't kid humor, like all the like My Cousin Vinny and all this stuff that's just like, man, there's a lot of like
Little adult
prison rape jokes and stuff. Like, I mean, geez Louise, this is a little, but man, it was so good. I mean, that movie still holds up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then and I don't know when Comedy Central, I know that's not what it was originally called. I don't know when that came to be, but eventually when I had that, like that was just what I watched.
Yeah.
As like a young teenager or whatever. It would just be that all the time. And that was the best because, now it's so many different things. But back in the day, it was just like replaying like 20-year-old movies and then just stand up on there. It was such a... Fridays was just nothing. It was the Friday night stand up or whatever. And you just find so many comics on just by watching that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're growing up in a small town in New York, and you're watching comedy. What was your inspiration for trying?
I don't know.
Comedy?
I mean, I guess it was just that, like, I guess that just planted a seed. It was just always in the back of your... Not the idea of me doing it, but just, like, there was always stand-up somewhere, like, in the back of my mind. I was just a kid. I was like just do like I wouldn't have like put it this way as a kid, obviously, but like looking back, like, I just liked creative things, whether it was like drawing or whatever. And when I was a little kid, I wanted to be an animator because I just like to draw so much. And then you would see like some, if like some Disney movie came out, they'd have some like making of behind the scenes, and they'd show those hand drawn and they would just be flipping from one page back to the other.
Yeah.
I loved all that stuff. I thought that was so cool. So I was just liked being creative and making whatever. But then the stand up just as a thing that I liked never went away. Like I said, like even like watching just specials on Comedy Central and all that stuff. And then finally, it must have just been like, I think the spark that lit must have just been like physically going into a comedy club. Like that made it all a little more three-dimensional. Because I remember seeing, I think I was maybe like a freshman in college. It was somewhere right around there. Senior in high school or whatever, right around there, early 2000. Mitch Hedberg did a set on Letterman.
Okay.
And part of his intro or whatever, Dave said, you can see him this weekend at Cap City Comedy Club in Austin, Texas, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then saw that set, and I was like, that was amazing. And he's good at and so I think my sister and I went, and that was the first time going to any live comedy ever.
Okay.
And first time going to Cap City.
Huh.
It was a really weird moment of this thing that you've kind of always seen, and then being in it. It was almost like a ride at Universal Studios where they try to like this is what it would look like if you could go into one of these places or whatever. If you were in this movie, it would feel like this. That was like I feel really lucky that I got to see Mitch Hedberg live.
Yeah, that's
bucket
list kind of experience.
Yeah, that and I mean I was real. It was just like the funniest thing I've ever seen. And so I guess it must have been just something about realizing that was like a physical place you could go to. And then I remember going to a couple other shows. I remember going to one show where after the show we went to, there was some guy, I think it was the comic that was there was going to be like a late night show after whatever we saw.
Okay.
And that was going to be like some like weird late night dirty show. It just wasn't a good show. But anyways, I think also just seeing stuff like that too, where it's like, oh,
there's some real crap out there.
There's some stuff that sucks, and that makes things way more graspable.
Yeah,
like I probably suck, and this guy sucks, and back then at Cap City, the open mics were at the time they were Wednesdays after the main show.
Okay. And
so it was just whoever you could get to stick around that would be your audience or whatever. So it's just this really, really gradual, organic thing of starting with just like, I like comedy. Like, comedy exists nearby. Oh, I went there. And then just this kind of snowball thing till eventually just at some point around that time contemplating the idea of jotting stuff down.
Yeah.
That was a weird thing too, that I liked writing anyways. I would just, if I got some weird like writing assignment in school, I would just kind of nerd out on that. And,
Well, we've missed a whole step because I assume you weren't commuting from Pleasant Valley to Cap City. What made you come to Austin? And I have to make a plug here for people to listen to the Austin Sessions podcast, because you did an interview with them several years back.
Yeah.
It's a really good interview, and it tells the story of where you were going to college. But I feel like we need to fill in the gap of how you got from New York to Austin by way of Belton, it sounds like.
Yeah. It was just my dad's job. IBM is a real big thing in New York and around the Poughkeepsie area. I forget like exactly physically where it's located, but at that time, so what would that have been? Because I was about 13. Whatever year that was, they were moving a lot of people down here.
Ah, okay.
I mean, to the point where a lot of the families we were friends with in New York, we're still friends with because they were all down here. Like everyone just got transplanted.
Yeah.
And so it was this crazy New York to Texas jump.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was a big adjustment that we didn't really want to make. I guess we kind of lucked out that at least it got to be Austin if you have to move to Texas. Not to be that person, but so that was it. It was just no saying the matter. I mean, we all just had to move. And then it's like, the weird thing is like IBM still exists. It's not like they were shutting down or something. I don't know why they had to transplant so many people. I guess that would be a thing to maybe ask my dad, but
the weather.
Yeah. I don't know what it is.
So what was it that it sounds to, if I could condense it down, it sounds like you're basically warming up to the idea of getting on a stage. Do you remember you're writing these things down and did you just feel like, well, this is kind of the next step for me, is to share these little writings that I have with people?
Yeah.
Or was it somebody goading you?
There was a little of all of that. It just, stand-up just looked cool to me. It just like, man, that looks really, there's that, and I hope I'm not repeating myself from the other podcast, but there's this documentary called Comedian. And I'm sure everyone around my age, if they're doing stand-up, I'm sure people hear someone start to tell a story that involves that movie and they just roll their eyes. It's just like the millionth time. But it's so, I like, kind of like with that Disney stuff, I love any behind-the-scenes making of kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that was just like the perfect, like, just that sort of making of, behind the scenes peak of this thing that I already loved so much.
Yeah.
And there's a moment, if you watch it with the commentary, because most of that movie's following Seinfeld around as he tries to build a new act.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of just him working on new stuff in New York and then him talking to other comics and all this stuff. And so if you watch the movie with the commentary on, it's one of the options is Seinfeld and Colin Quinn, who's also in that movie a whole bunch. And there's this moment when Seinfeld is doing this gig in like Florida, and it's him, the late Gary Shandling, Chris Rock, Kevin Nealon. Oh, wow. I think that's it. There might have been one other person on that lineup. But there's just this moment in the green room when they're all trying to figure out like what order are they going up and all this stuff, and they're all just whatever. And you watch it with the commentary on, and Seinfeld just says to Colin Quinn, "Is there anything more fun than hanging out with comedians?" And she's like, "No." And I remember, I don't know why that quote has just like stuck in my brain, where it's just, because it was just, even the part when you're not doing stand-up is almost as fun as doing it, because just the whole thing, I don't know, it all looked as fun. I was thinking recently that if I ever got to meet Jerry Seinfeld, the thing I would tell him is that movie introduced me to the first version of work that excited me. Yeah. Like that was the first thing where even when it doesn't look fun, it's still like, I want to do that.
Mm-hmm. That was actually something that struck me from that Austin Sessions episode that you did, is talking about that movie and how, sure, you like the concept of being up on stage and delivering your jokes, but the stuff off the stage was like, this is, I like it all.
Yeah, it's almost just as fulfilling in its own different way, whether it's the writing part or, traveling, even just like some having to stay in like these decrepit condos or whatever. It's all kind of, you can romanticize it a little bit, even if it's miserable in the moment, but you're still just like, I don't know. It's kind of like that thing of, like I was saying before, about like walking through the comedy club, like you feel like you're in this own little weird experience that's kind of unique. So that movie, that documentary, that was kind of the thing where kind of sealed the deal around the idea of like I really want to try that. And then even then, but when I was in school, I was never in theater or I was never on a stage ever in my life.
Okay.
So there was still a lot of anxiety around that. So even I would go to the Cap City open mics, and at the time it was, you signed up for it when you showed up.
Okay.
They had this bowl and a whole bunch of little ticket stubs, and you wrote your name on the back of a ticket and put in this bowl, and they would like, it wasn't a lottery. Some shows do a lottery where you might not get up. This was just, they would just pull the tickets out and write the names, and that would be the order of the show or whatever.
That's interesting.
So for weeks, I would go and then I would just chicken out, and I just wouldn't put my name down. And it finally, so to get back to your question, it finally was a friend who said, I will do stand-up if you do stand-up too. Sort of like, I needed that push or whatever. Yeah. So this buddy of mine, Daniel, we just both went up this same night, and it was fine. But that's what it took, was a little bit of, like I said, a little bit of everything.
How much do you remember about that feeling about being on stage?
Pretty well. I couldn't like do that set. I couldn't recite it, but I can remember all the feelings of it pretty clearly. I remember it was this piggyback style show where the last comic would bring the next comic on.
Okay.
And I also remember, I've never done anything on a stage, and so it's like, hearing your own voice amplified into a room is really, really bizarre.
Yeah.
And I remember that feeling. And then I was trying to think, thinking back on it retroactively, I don't think it was. This is my impression of what people, because I got a couple people that said good job or whatever, and one lady who maybe used to work down at the Valve or something like that, who seemed surprised that it was my very first time. But this is the thing, I don't think I had a good set. I think I kind of brushed off the jokes not working in a way that I think people watching, this is my guess is, that's not some guy who is never done this. I'm not watching someone who's clearly never done this before. I'm watching someone who's maybe done this before, who's bombing. That's a weird subtle difference of I don't think none of the jokes got big laughs, but it didn't just send me devastated back to never ever think of doing it again or whatever.
And how long before you did it a second time?
The next week.
Okay.
At the time, it was just Wednesdays at Cap City and then Thursdays at the Valve.
So once you got the ball rolling, you just kept going with it.
I mean, as much as I could. At the time, I was an hour drive-ish to get down into the city to do those sets, and I was going to school. And so, it was like, if you either missed or just couldn't, whether you wanted to or not, if you couldn't make it down there, then it's like you had those 2 shots, and that was it each week. So I did it that one Wednesday, and then the following Thursday I did the Valve, and I think that one went a little better. I just did that as much as I could, and then once you kind of, like you were saying, get that ball rolling a little bit, every comic, Or I don't know. I feel like a lot of them, especially when you're new, then you start going in. Like anytime you're like eating somewhere, like this, I like this restaurant. You think we could do comedy here? And like, there's a little. I wonder if it's always supposed to be bands, or if we could like. So, I put together like a show or two when I was still living in Belton.
Okay, based in Austin or up in?
No, up in Belton.
Okay.
There was this like pub or something. I think it was called the Duckhorn, and they had this kind of separate closed off room that I think was for like events or whatever. If you wanted to like book that room, I don't even know who I talked to, but I got to do a one night thing there, and just a bunch of people that I met in Austin from doing small shows there. We all just drove up. It was actually a really great show. It actually went pretty well, and I think Lucas Melendez was on that one, and Doug Mellard and David Huntsberger.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was great. And my buddy Daniel, at the time Daniel Jackson, now Daniel Kilpatrick. Yeah, I think, and maybe Carrie Lendo was on that show too. I'm trying to think of like that first Rat Pack of I don't know, my comedy class, quote unquote. Yeah.
So you wanted to bring your fix so that you wouldn't have to drive the hour and a half every week.
Well, and like I said, you just get so obsessed with the idea of like maybe we can just do shows here too. And yeah. So, and I put together a second show at that same place. But it was I have no management skills, no organizational skills. That was a show that I put together, but I couldn't physically go do for some reason. And then it turned out that it was I think I probably just did no job in like communicating anything like comics. Like the show never happened. Yeah, yeah. But that was the beginning.
And how long after you started did you start playing around with the funniest person in Austin contest?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a really good question. I don't think I wasted too much time before I entered that thing. I'd probably been doing it for about a year before I entered. The first time I entered, I didn't advance at all. Like, I didn't get past the first round of prelims. And then the second year I got to the finals. Yeah. Second year I got to the finals. That's right, because at that show where I made it to the finals, I was doing it 3 years. So that's right. Okay. I did it for a year and didn't enter, and then entered, and then third year, yeah. And then the fourth year was when I did the contest for the third time. And
you won. You're so modest. I could tell. Okay, I'm going to have to say he won 2007.
2007, yep. Yeah.
And, with some of our remaining time, we could talk about, because I'm curious, not to take away from anything, but what the contest is like today.
Yeah.
And the evolution, but how many people were entering it in the mid 2000s?
I mean, it had to at least been half of the amount of people that are in it now.
Crazy.
I mean, now, the only reason it doesn't go for months and months is now it's just, I think back then you could comfortably have a round once a week and still wrap it up in a timely fashion.
Those were the days.
I know. Yeah. Now it's at least
2 nights a week,
2 or 3.
Yeah. For 10 months.
It goes on so long, and there's so many people, and you get so much more money now if you win.
Yeah.
And it's grown, but at its core, it's the quality is this. It's still you get to that core, the center of that contest is still just like a compacted diamond of how good all those comics are.
Yeah,
that's another. Every year it comes back around, and if you watch it around, you just think would the set I won with would that still?
You gotta, That's true. I was interviewing somebody recently, and we were talking about. So we're now entering our FPIA philosophical corner, and we were talking about whose who's ever really comfortable at the contest.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You're saying, well, there's Dustin Spaylock because he's just recording everything.
Yeah.
And the last year's winner. That's pretty much.
Yeah. Until it's the previous year's winner's night that they have to host it.
Yeah.
Hosting can be really fun, but it is also that you still don't relax.
Yeah.
Because first of all, you're brought up as a winner of this thing. And so, I mean, the idea of like even having an okay set, I mean,
You're held to a higher standard.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
going,
You have to go out there and kill it as if you have won this contest, which you have.
So the 2 years ago winner is the most comfortable.
Yeah. The most comfortable person is someone like, let's say, Brendan Walsh, who has successfully just completely moved on and separated himself from that contest and doesn't. The most comfortable person is someone who doesn't live in Austin and doesn't attach themselves to that contest. It is such a. I think too, part of it is Austin's not an industry town. And so all of what, like if you lived in Los Angeles, that idea of like, oh, you never know who's in that audience or whatever.
Yeah, right.
So who's trying to like do your best. I mean, everyone's always trying to do their best, but that kind of like heightened stakes. Austin, for this town, it's all just condensed into that contest where you are suddenly trying to be as polished and this best version of yourself. And then also that idea of there are now people in the back of the room. That's because of the judges that they managed to pull off for that contest. So what would normally just be a city's sort of industry kind of presentational mentality, it all just gets crammed into those however many weeks or whatever.
Right.
There's always good energy in that room as far as like, the crowd has a little extra something invested in it too.
Yeah.
So it's a fun energy, but then it's definitely a stressful ordeal.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fun.
But you have moved on, and you've done Live at Gotham, which I actually don't really know what that is other than it's essentially a stand-up special through Comedy Central. Or is it just a recording of a showcase show? What?
It's kind of, Live at Gotham it's almost like it was a Comedy Central version of kind of like the show that I would grow up watching, which is like one of those showcase shows. That one was, and those tend to always be sort of like a New Faces style thing where the idea is you don't know right now who these people are, but these are just like some good comics or whatever, and then just 4 or 5 people, comics getting up doing like 8 minutes edited down or whatever. And that's actually, I think, even more than trying to just like win the funniest person thing. You cannot win and get so much more even just out of it by just, that's how I know that I was doing it for 3 years the second time I did that contest, because there was at the finals where one of the representatives from Comedy Central after the show came up and asked how long you've been doing this, and I said 3 years, and she was like, oh, I was hoping you would say that. That's perfect. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. Yeah, I got Live at Gotham through doing that contest the year I didn't win the contest.
Oh, interesting.
So,
because I thought, okay, one's going to feed into the other, but no.
Yeah, no, it was just having a really, good set in front of somebody who is the kind of like part of why they're there, other than judging the contest, is to see all the. It's a great, way to kind of like kill a couple birds with one stone. So yeah, I just talked to her a little bit, and then they came back. Comedy Central came back once. This wasn't during the contest, but to do like a showcase at Cap City. By that point, it was pretty sure that I was gonna get it. Like they basically with a little wink said, "Do the set that you would do if you were booked for this show." And then I don't know, like a week or two later, after that showcase, which I guess was almost like a callback, just got a phone call saying you got this. Yeah,
Wow.
you're invited to do this show. And then, yeah, that was the first time I ever did stand-up in New York City. It was a lot of really cool firsts.
Yeah.
And a little, like, full circle. It was this really, I don't know, cool combination of getting this gig, and it's in New York City, and it's at this... And it's not just in New York City, it's at this very, like, kind of iconic New York club, and it's for TV, but not just for TV. It's for this channel that you, like, grew up watching. It was, like, all these things. It was, I don't know, it was really cool. And even just down to, like, the little details of, like, each episode had a different host, and that would be, like, a more established touring sort of a headliner comedian would host the show. And even just that, like, Andy Kindler was the host.
Oh, he's so good.
Of my episode. I know.
So
I mean,
good.
you couldn't get a more, like, excited comedy nerd bit of news.
Oh, my gosh.
You know, because, I mean, you could get, like, someone where you're like, oh, yeah, they're kind of funny. But this was like, oh, my God. Like, I mean, so every...
Like, oh, I have to perform? What? Are you kidding me? I just want to watch Andy.
Yeah, right. Yes, seriously. Watch Andy have to, like... compose himself and like, you know, be a host, you know. And he's so nice. Yeah. And so the whole thing, every part of it was just, it was really cool. Yeah. Yeah, that was really exciting.
Wow, so you have that experience and then you win.
Yeah.
FIA. Wow.
Yeah, and it was that thing of by the time the taping came around, it was all in that year of getting to do that. And then I forget which, I think, oh man, it was still really cold in New York, so it might have been like early, like maybe around the spring of doing the taping and then the contest a little, you know, just a little later. Yeah. Yeah, that was a crazy year for sure. Yeah.
So all of that stuff, you're now, I mean, so many doors must have opened. I mean, for you.
Yeah,
you're
know.
so modest. You're not going to tell me, oh yeah, then I got to do this.
And yeah. I mean, I've, you know, you get lucky in the sense of like getting to, you know, do different festivals and, you know, some stuff like that. Austin is a really good place to kind of, there's, you know, a lot of kind of square ones that you can jump off of just by the nature of who will occasionally come through, whether it's, you know, someone like what happened, you know, like a showcase thing and there's someone there, like they're specifically there to potentially book for whatever it is, like a show or a festival or whatever. And then also just because Austin's a good comedy town, you can sort of station yourself here if you want to and meet the people that come through and then maybe that can, like, you know, work its way into something down the road or whatever. But I mean, I definitely, there is something to be said for eventually moving because, you know, a lot of that stuff is sort of passing through as opposed to like you going to kind of like the source or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, you know, between like different like shows and all that stuff, it's been nice. And it's nice to know that just through all these different experiences over the years, like I could go to New York or wherever and already kind of have a list in the back of my mind of like, okay, I know email this person or at this point, I mean, there's so many people that are just Austin pals that that are in all those different cities or whatever. So yeah, it's pretty cool and try to just sort of contemplate like what I want to do down the road or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
Before we start talking about your phenomenal album, I want to ask because between 2007 and 2015, were you hearing the siren call of LA or New York?
Yeah, there's always that, not pressure, but it's always in the back of your mind. You know, there's it's funny because there's so few like quote unquote rules or this idea of like steps that you take or whatever. It's all real vague, and that's always kind of like a big elephant in the room is, are you going to move or when are you going to move? And I just I think I very mistakenly thought there was a right time to do that. I mean, you could maybe move too soon, maybe, or, you know, especially if you're starting here, this is a great place to build up, material and all that stuff.
Right.
It's a lot easier to, it's a small city. It's easier to get around, especially now, like easier to get stage time and really kind of audiences that welcome you to kind of like experiment or, just whatever. There's not too much pressure to just be super polished at an open mic for no reason or whatever.
Yep.
You can kind of work on your stuff. So you could maybe move too soon, but then I think a lot of it too is me just the same way I would go to an open mic but not sign up. There was a lot of that sort of like uncertainty or maybe a lack of confidence or something that I justified as like, no, I don't think it's quite the right time.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to show all my cards, and because it is kind of a gamble, and that can make it really intimidating to see like someone move to whatever city.
Yeah.
City XYZ, and then like, oh man, I think they're just like doing some open mics, or like their situation doesn't seem to have changed much compared to like if they had just stayed here or whatever. And then there are those stories of like Chris Fairbanks or Brendan Walsh or whoever who moved and kind of, got like a ball rolling, at least from an outsider's perspective. So I never knew like, that's the thing. I always thought like, oh, I'm not sure when the right time to, or if I should. And then, so I think if I like changed like anything like Time Machine style, it would just be like, just, pull that trigger or whatever and just move. Not that that I don't want to make it sound like I regret my life or something. But that I think that was a just misconception of mine, was there was some right or wrong kind of way to approach that.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the tricky, I mean, that's got to be any sort of performer conundrum, is like there's no, handbook or whatever, even
Well,
just...
Bryan, after a year of interviewing, we're going to be writing a guidebook that tells people exactly when the right time is to
There's
move
nothing
to LA
better than
or
a
New
good
York.
book about comedy.
By people who don't know
Yeah,
comedy.
yeah. Here's how comedy works. And you're welcome.
We just signed the book deal.
Yeah.
No.
Finally, a good book on how to do it. Yeah, I mean, it's all so vague. Even if people like what you're doing, their best advice is just keep writing.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's those vague ideas of like, oh, you start going to open mics and then you host, and then if they like you host a few times, and then you do this thing or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, and even those rules are so vague.
Yeah.
And then, now it's a little more blown apart. Like back then it was, get to this certain point and then you do a Comedy Central Presents and then you do this, and that's those kind of imaginary, steps are even more imaginary, I feel like, because you do one of these or do a web series or just, write for some online thing to make those ends meet or whatever. Like, it was just all these weird fake rules that I thought like, this is what a comedian does. Every new comedian loves trying to think they know what a comedian does. Oh, you need a shitty job. You need the key to this is having a job you don't like during the day.
That's right.
Find something miserable that's so miserable they don't care if you have to leave town spontaneously or whatever, as opposed to like just trying to craft a life that you enjoy living. Like be miserable here, then go bomb for a little bit, and then so all these weird rules that you just kind of impose on yourself, it's all ridiculous. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about something that isn't imaginary. That's my smooth segue here.
I loved it.
Thank you. A+ for Valerie. Your album, That's How Scientists Talk.
Yeah, it's catchy.
Which was not the first. Was it the second album released by Sure Thing Records?
It's
very early on.
Yeah, they had done their first thing was like a compilation style.
Yep.
Good, like, whatever, maybe like 15 comics just doing these short little sets. And then after that, the first sort of proper, like, just one act, full length album was Mac Blake's.
Okay.
Bird Drugs,
Yeah.
fantastic album. And then I think mine was
so.
the second one. And I mean, now they have they're building up a good
God,
library.
they're ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. But yeah, I think mine was the second full length album that they released. Yeah.
And because I know you're not going to drop this fact, I'm going to have to drop
Okay.
it for you. Split Sider called your album like the top one among the top 6 in the country. And by 2015, the pace of comics releasing albums was it's not like, okay, there were only 8 that were released that year. There were a lot. And you were among some other names that are, household names.
Right.
And you're there, and it's like, how mind-blowing was that to get that kind of recognition?
It was really nice. Yeah, I don't think anyone at the album, I don't know if they knew ahead of time that list was coming out. I think they had maybe sent them the album. But I don't know how much knowledge they had of that. I had zero knowledge about that list. Yeah, that was really nice. I mean, it was really unexpected. And then it was, I was very, flattered. And then...
and it stands up. I just listened to it.
Oh, thanks.
And the opening track is killer.
Oh, thank you.
I love it. I'm like, you just kind of did a show in about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Oh, thanks.
And then the longer tracks, what you follow up with.
Yeah,
it's like really... highbrow, but like the name that you came up with, it Let's Have Scientists Talk, is a perfect name for just kind of an intellectual but completely understandable and
thanks.
easy to digest.
I literally just wanted an album title that didn't sound like a comedy album title. I don't know. There's always some weird pun or something. It's just like,
well, that's funny that you should mention that because you're probably seeing the marketing campaign for the album that's coming out.
That is great. I love what they're doing.
So good,
yeah. Oh man, to the point where I'm like, there might not even be an album. Like maybe they're just messing with us, which would also be pretty sweet. Yeah, I think that just came from years of seeing just like on the walls of clubs like horrible headshots and all these weird like comics just having to think every fabric of every part of their life has to be this weird like wackadoo thing. So yeah, I was like, when I originally was going to call it The Good Old Days. And then I thought of That's How Scientists Talk. I was like, that almost sounds like a Modest Mouse, some like, indie band thing. And I was like, and it doesn't sound like a comedy album. And so I was like, I think that's what I'm going to go with. I like that. Yeah.
How long had you been thinking about doing an album?
Quite a while.
Okay.
But it fortunately never kind of played out the way I wanted it to. It kind of was almost this like meant to be thing the way it finally played out. Because, I think the first kind of time that seed was planted in my brain was there was this website that still exists, Rooftop Comedy.
Yeah.
And years ago, they started producing albums, but it was this thing of they would like email me or whatever, like, "Hey, do you want to do an album? It'll only cost you a lot of money and all this stuff." And I didn't turn away from it in the sense of like thinking it was a scam. It was just like I just physically don't have that much money.
Yeah.
I don't have all that. I have no money. So, but that kind of I think you start thinking about like. It was just like the same way I like even just writing in general, just the idea of like creating an album just sounded like a fun thing to do. And so you always just wonder like, well, I have this X amount of minutes worth of stuff. Like, that'd be fun to do. And then would try to like my own sort of half-assed attempts at it or whatever. And like one time I recorded a couple short sets and I was going to try to piece them together myself. And this whole thing just like, it just never really fell into place the way I wanted to. And then Sure Thing, asked me when they were putting their label together.
Yeah.
And the way they kind of were offering to sort of take the reins on a lot of like that legwork part of it was just so appealing. And then just worked out so well where it's finally like this, what I would be recording, I'm this would feel like a complete, like, cohesive thing.
Yeah.
And just the way all those puzzle pieces actually fell into place, I couldn't have really mapped out like a better scenario for how it played out. Yeah, so I wanted to for a long time, but fortunately, it didn't happen until the way it happened.
Yeah, and then it all clicked in perfectly.
Yeah, it really did. Every part of it clicked in perfectly to the point where even like we have the day of the show, of the recording.
Yeah.
And then we kind of had, we had a backup set planned for the next day in case, just like, oh, if this one joke bombed, we'll just have this second show, which I didn't want to do. I just didn't see how it would play out. Like, you put in so much work to get everyone in that room. And it's like, okay, but if it doesn't work, can you promise? Like, I have to get a whole second pool of people. And then, but that second show didn't even happen. The next day, this was when that giant storm came through that flooded Austin. The storm that like refilled Lake Travis. That was the day that I was supposed to do that follow-up set.
Yeah.
But the show that we got to do, I mean, it worked out the way, in my head I was like, if I'm doing jokes I know work in front of an enthusiastic audience, like, why would that not just be the album?
Yeah.
And that's like literally down to, we physically didn't even have the option to do a second show. So, everything just fell into place just at the exact moment it should have, It was, it was crazy.
Can I call you Bryan Gutmann, the natural progression comic? Like, just everything falls into place nicely and perfectly. And
if you wait a really, really long time, things eventually work out at one exact little spark of a moment.
See, there's a scientist.
Yeah.
We're going to start wrapping up, but I know it goes by super fast.
It really, geez.
And gosh, what's next for you? What are, you've got the album, you've been on TV with specials.
I right now am trying to just build up a new kind of almost full circle again, like the documentary that got me into comedy. I just want to build up a new act. I want to have like a new hour if I can. I mean, that's sort of like an ideal thing, so that I could then go around with that and be able to, point to an album and have it actually be like two separate things. I want to do that. I'd like to get back into traveling a little bit as much as I can, and honestly just try to kind of figure that out for myself too, sort of like what the next thing is. Like, kind of what I was saying a little bit ago, now with like things like this, like podcasts and so many, avenues, like it's sort of wide open, like what if you want to do a thing, figure out what that is and try just doing that too, as opposed to maybe when I started, at least for myself, had a very small idea of like kind of what your possibilities were, or like what your options were, like you don't have to just be this or that or whatever. Yeah, so that's something I am kind of trying to figure out a lot right now. Like me and buddies back in the day would, come up with some idea and just think like, oh, that you would write a script thinking like, oh, comedians write scripts. And it's like, well, take that whole long thing, but like, you don't have to try to sell that to somebody. Like, make that a web series or turn it into a comic book or, like do anything you want. So there's a lot of right now just trying to figure out like what are some of the things that I really love to do and, figure out a way to kind of get that out there, whether it be, like just traveling with stand-up or, something more like this or, it's kind of a open field right now. So I'm just trying to figure that out. Yeah. So just trying to get that album out there and in the meantime and all that stuff. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's all little, just a big question mark,
Yeah. Because one of the things that is unsaid is you're juggling like new responsibilities as a parent, and that, cuts into your time to be able to go out and...
It's a little bit of figuring out how to juggle stuff, or even, I want to be there, be like present, be like a present parent and all that. So that means like by the time by the end of that day, at the end of the night each day, if I am the one that like, okay, good night, and I click off the light, and then you look at what time it is, like, all right, well, any open mic that was going on in town, that's halfway over or whatever. So figuring out like just even how to get out and work on stuff, and I just try to write when I can and figure it out enough so that it's, figured out as much as possible for when I can get it on stage and all that stuff.
Which actually comes full circle to find that avenue for yourself that works within those constraints that you might have. Yeah,
and trying to just figure out, now that we're not dealing with like a newborn situation, figuring out like just like the logistics of like, could I like sprinkle in these weekends of like maybe even trying to travel and all that stuff. So it's a little bit kind of almost like just relearning the game. It's like playing basketball for 10 years, then Michael Jordaning that thing and getting into baseball for no reason, then crawling back to basketball. It's a weird time, man.
Well, on that, I'm going to spring on you another question.
Okay.
One word to describe your future.
We're gonna go with unknown. It shouldn't be so. It shouldn't be so bleak. It should be just. I should have used the. I almost said optimistic, and then I just said unknown. Oh God. I'm a downer.
No.
It's raining outside. There's a mood. Guys, I'm doing just fine.
He is.
Listen,
He really is.
I had some comedians like a tweet earlier, so everything's going to be fine, you guys. Everything's going to be just fine.
Yes. Well, let's take that moment and tell us where we can find you on social media, because you are an excellent. And it's funny because in Austin Sessions, you were kind of wormholing about how you didn't understand how to work Twitter and you just couldn't get any traction with it. But your tweets are like super good.
Oh, thanks. So it's all just at Bryan Gutmann, whatever it is, like Instagram or Twitter or whatever. It's all, it's just my name.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've got a website where we can...
just go to surethingrecords.com. Okay. I just keep it right there. Album. Keep it simple. Yeah. Instead of like, for some reason, also just... Or go to my website, or go to this. Just go to surethingrecords.com. They've got it there, and hopefully I'm going to try to... I was talking to them not too long ago about maybe even trying to get some more merch and put it through their site and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah. So. I mean, we didn't, the design for the album is like, that's a t-shirt. That's a t-shirt.
I want to just do... It sound like... I don't want to become like a brand or something, but it's just like another way, like... Instead of just always posting about the album, switch it up a little bit, but still in a way that brings people back to that site. So, and also just go to surethingrecords.com just because they have other really awesome albums too.
Yeah.
It's really good stuff.
They're good guys.
They are good guys. BKO, Duncan Carson, good dudes.
All right. Well, that is a wrap on Comedy Wham Presents Bryan Gutmann. We hope you've enjoyed learning about how Bryan got to be the comedic genius that you heard today, as much as I have, as he giggles.
Oh, man.
Be sure to visit comedywham.com. Give us a follow on Twitter and Instagram at Comedy Wham. You can listen to past interviews on Stitcher, Google Play, and iTunes. This has been Comedy Wham Presents Bryan Gutmann. I'm Valerie, and that's been funny. Thank you, Bryan.
Thank you.